Okay guys, welcome back to another episode of the Bishy PE Podcast. We are delighted to say today that we are joined by live football TV presenter David Tanner. Good morning, David.
Guys, how you doing? It's nice to be here. Nice to be back home, albeit virtually.
As always, we're joined by Mr. McHugh and Mr. Johnson. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. I'm so happy David joined us this morning. An absolute hero, I mean.
Well, it's lovely to be faced with three PE teachers who are all considerably younger than me. That makes me feel very old.
Superb. I must admit, David, this is by far the most excited we've all been for an interview. We've got one of these WhatsApp chats, and Mr. McHugh's been firing messages all week telling us how excited he is for this.
Well, if ever there was proof that lockdown is not good for you, there it is. We'll be able to get out soon, guys.
So I'll kick us off this morning, David, if you'd mind introducing yourself and telling us a wee bit about yourself.
Yes, my name is David Tanner. I'm a Capricorn. Anything else?
Where are you from, profession?
I was brought up in Bishopbriggs. You may be familiar with that. The highlight of my school career was being voted vice captain of the now former Bishopbriggs High School. I still can't quite get used to saying academy. And when I was at Bishopbriggs High in 6th year, I started my broadcasting career as a 16-year-old, a T-boy at Radio Clyde. And the school had a part to play in that because they released me to go to a broadcasting training course, which had been set up by an organisation called Community Service Volunteers, CSV. And they were part of Radio Clyde's Clyde Action. And they allowed me Monday afternoons off for a good chunk of 6th year, actually. And that allowed me to go in there and learn a little bit about radio. And one of the guys who worked there, Dougie Jackson, who himself was later a well-known name on radio, Dougie said, you're really, really keen, and would you fancy working in radio? And I said, absolutely. And about 3 weeks later, he got a look at me in all the classes that they were running, and he gave me a phone from Radio Clyde and said, look, there's a vacancy coming up here for a Saturday boy serving coffee to the presenters and so on. How do you fancy coming along? And the rest, as they say, is history. So that's where it started. And the school were very good at letting me off back then. It wasn't really the done thing, but they knew I was keen to do it. And my timetable was quite light in 6th year. And that's how it all started, a career in broadcasting. Since then, I've worked at Clyde for a good 7 years, working in news and sport and general programming as well. Used to work with some of the music DJs. Today actually is the 30th anniversary of a massive event, probably the biggest program in Radio Clyde's history, called The Big Day. And when Glasgow was the European City of Culture, they did this massive multi-venue pop concert on. Sheena Easton, I remember headlining it, came in from America. A whole host of bands all over the city. Clyde covered that. They won a gold award at the International Radio Awards in New York for that. That was 30 years ago today, I noticed. So I worked on stuff like that. And then one day I got a call from Jerry McNee at STV and went to work for STV on Scott Sport and Extra Time. And Scotland Today, which is now called STV News at 6, did that. From a very young age, actually I was 23 when I debuted on that. Absolutely terrifying experience. And from there I had 20 years at Sky Sports, and I've been freelance for the last 3 years doing all manner of things, BT Sport, and very busy at the moment with Talk Sport. So that's kept me busy. That is the whistle stop tour of my life. And my mum still lives in Bishopbriggs. My sister lives in Bishopbriggs. One niece is at Bishopbriggs Academy, and number 2 will be starting whenever the school restarts after the summer. So still a big connection with the town.
Superb. What was your kind of favourite subject at Bishopbriggs High, David? And was there anybody in particular that was like an influential role model for you?
You know, a lot of people say they didn't like school. I loved it. I really loved Bishopbriggs High. I think I love all the subjects, whether I was good at them or not. Wasn't a huge fan of physics because there was always some idiot with a Bunsen burner never more than 6 feet away from you. But my favourites actually were favourite subject was English, and I was really lucky. I had 2 English teachers for the majority of my time at the school. Mrs. Murray in certainly the early part of school, and Mrs. Murray, who was from Bishopbriggs, I believe, drummed into you about sentence structure. And it was a great grounding for me in life, but also in journalism as well. And it still grates on me when I hear bad grammar and, particularly with the advent of social media on my Twitter account and my Instagram account and my Facebook pages, some of the comments I get. We were well aware that pardon?
I have noticed that. I have noticed you're quite partial at picking up some faults in people's Twitters.
I mean, the plural of you is you. Have we agreed on that?
Do you know who's really bad for that? Mr. Moulsdale.
Good. That's not bad. That's good.
No, when we get the WhatsApp group, he's always picking up on whenever myself or Mr. Robin or Mr. McHugh make a kind of grammatical error or an error in the spelling. He's always on top of it, isn't he?
Yeah. Good for him. I like his style.
You feel under pressure sending him a text message.
But yeah, use YOUSE, YOUZE, YOU''S. Oh my word, it is absolutely awful, But anyway, and certainly later on, in high school, I had a teacher called Miss McLeod, who was very old-fashioned, and I found her very funny. Some of the pupils found her terrifying. Her nickname was Backdive, and this was apparently due to the days of corporal punishment, when she would go right back with the belt and lean back, do a backdive and make her presence felt with the belt. Luckily, when I was halfway through primary school, they banned the belt in Scottish schools, certainly Scottish state schools. So we didn't get the chance to see that, but I found her hilarious. And she was a great inspiration. She was a great inspiration. So, fun enough, there's a columnist in the Sunday Post, a guy called Donald MacLeod, who owns the Garage nightclub. You lot don't look like you've had a night out before, so you might not have heard of that. But Donald was at Bishopbriggs High School, and he has a very different memory of Miss McLeod. He wasn't a fan, but I thought she was terrific, and that helped me do well in English. Got a real love of writing. I got an A for my English higher, which in those days that was uncommon, and that allowed me to get into journalism school at Napier Polytechnic, as it was in 1989. So that was the one I enjoyed. I enjoyed geography as well. It was a good department up on the 3rd floor, I think that was. And they were a good bunch of people. Not a huge fan of maths, I would have to say. Not a huge fan of the languages, I would have to say. But it was good. It was good fun. The technical department was something else. Oh my word, that was a home for some eccentric old guys who were old. A lot of them were ex-shipbuilders who were teaching us for a life in shipbuilding. And if you listened carefully, you could just about hear the sound of the shipyard doors being bolted shut for the last time. In the night. In fact, do you guys know what a shipyard is? Probably not.
Yeah.
We're too young to have seen them, but they were certainly interesting characters. But that was a great laugh. I mean, the technical department was a hoot because they were funny and they knew they were funny, So no, I really enjoyed the school. I really did enjoy the school,
Superb. Was there any extracurricular activities that you get involved in?
No, because and I've got a real bee in my bonnet about this, because the EIS, the EIS members, the EIS leader at the time, John Pollock, went to war with the government at the time, and they stopped. Part of the industrial action was that they stopped extracurricular activities. Now, the rights or the wrongs of that, I don't know. We all get, for most of first and second year at school, we get Tuesdays and Thursdays off because they were always on strike. It was either one day it would be the EIS, the next it would be the NASWT, and that wiped out. There wasn't a school football team. There was nothing happened after 4 o'clock as it was in first and second year. I think we moved to 3 o'clock finish later on. So that was a big disappointment. Not that I would have made it into the football team, but the other activities. My son is at something different every day after school, and I think it thinks that it develops a community, or it broadens the community, and it deepens the connection with the school, I think. So that disappeared. And if you actually look at it, I have a theory that my intake was 1983. We started secondary school in 1983, just as the dispute over the Munn and Dunning report, which led to the EIS banning the extracurricular activity. If you look at it there, the age group at those of school leavers from the period after that coincides with the decline in the Scottish national football team. Late 90s, 98 was our last major tournament. And it coincides with the decline in the Scotland rugby team. 99 was our last 5 nations, I think it was 99. So in the rugby, so I don't think that's a coincidence, because the school teams were absolutely crucial for the development of our football players. If you look at some of the old shoot and goal Match magazine player profiles, they'll often say, they'll often be asked, what was your car? And it was always Morris Marinas and Vauxhall Vivas and stuff like that. Pre-match meal, steak and chips with fried egg on top. It was a different era. But the biggest influence in their career is always asked, and it's always Mr. So-and-so, Mr. Irvin, who ran the school football team. He was a geography teacher, but he ran the school football team, and his encouragement and him giving me the opportunity to play and play and play made me a player. And that stopped in 1983. So we didn't have any extracurricular, unless my memory is fading with time. So I think that was a shame.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think that's something that we've faced even quite recently, trying to get kids to appreciate the value of school football and try to get them to play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Certainly when I was at school, it was, you wanted to play with a school football team, even if you were good enough.
And the one thing about developing athletes is they need to play. They need to practice.
Yeah.
Practice. It's not always about coaching. I hear people say it's about coaching. I'm not so sure about that. I think it's facilities, access to facilities, and access to game time, or to action time. And I think that's absolutely crucial. Practice. It's the same in anything. And when you look at the decline in Scottish football over the last 40 years, they were playing all the time. We played football all the time in the playground until they banned it. Usually Dougie Hall, the late Dougie Hall, the Janny, if someone put a ball through a window, everything would be banned for a while, which is understandable.
Someone you mean yourself?
No, I don't think I ever had it hard enough, to be honest with you. I never quite get the laces through it hard enough. But so yeah, it's absolutely crucial, So if they do want to be football players, they need to be playing all the time. The kid next door to us here has just signed for Celtic. He's just turned 16, and he is on the books of Celtic now. And he plays all the time. He's a modern player because he's learned, in 3G and with a perfect uniform and with nice fences around it in the way that we didn't. So he's learning the modern way. But before everybody sat on PlayStation the whole time, we played football all the time. We stopped for the golf season came on. We got the golf club out, and hit the golf ball up and down the park at the back of our house, just off Kirky Road. And when it was Wimbledon time, we got the tennis rackets out. But certainly practice for me is absolutely key, and access to facilities. And I hear you've got good facilities there now.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. Okay, who's next, Mr. Jones?
Okay, so I think you touched on it a wee bit, David, but I just want to know a wee bit about your journey into university life and your studies at university.
I didn't enjoy it at all, to be honest with you, because I'd loved school. And I moved through to Edinburgh. I was 17, and a very young 17 as well. And I didn't enjoy it first time round. And funnily enough, the Napier, the campus that we went to, Merchiston, is now about half a mile away from my house where I'm sitting talking to you now. Yeah. And I lecture there now in sports journalism and TV journalism modules part-time, and have done for many years. And it's funny because the building hasn't changed. It was very modern back when we were there. But I absolutely hated it because it was so alien. And it was looking back on it, it was very much about newspapers. It was very much about hot metal newspapers. So I never felt hugely comfortable there. I actually went back about 10, 15 years ago and did a master's in journalism just to update my skills, right. And just to find out what they were learning and whatnot. I just did it quietly, did it part-time, which, looking back on it, wasn't the best idea, given I had a toddler in the house and was working full-time for Sky at the time. But it was a great way of updating my skills. So I didn't hugely enjoy it because it was just such an alien concept, to be honest with you, because they were very hands-on at Bishopbriggs High, and then got into university where they spoke at you and left without any great pastoral care. And it's different now, by the way. It was quite a culture shock, because school had been very enjoyable and very comfortable as well,
Yeah. Did you say, David, that you were working at the same time as studying, or did that overlap?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I was on a Friday when a lot of the guys were heading out into town. I was running for the train to Glasgow. I could still remember running down the hill at the Mound with my typewriter. And if anybody watching this doesn't know what a typewriter is, Google it. But I can tell you they were heavy bits of kit. And the typewriter was always with you in the journalism course. And I would go running down, get the train to Bishopbriggs, drop off my kit, and then get back on the train and go to Clydebank, where Radio Clyde was based. So to work in their Friday sports show and do the prep work for the Saturday show, So and usually at the weekend I'd be there in there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So 15 quid a shift as well. Yeah. That was gross. So, but I mean, it was an unbelievable experience.
See, outside of that, did you have any, maybe when you were at school, did you have any smaller part-time jobs that maybe helped you develop skills that have helped you to be successful?
I didn't have a job as such. I mean, a lot of the guys were working milk rounds. Right. Yeah. They were easy to spot because they would be asleep. In class. Some of the guys had paper rounds. My sister had a paper round. I remember the Glaswegian newspaper. I don't know if they still deliver that, but she did it about once a month, and I get sent out to cover for her most of the time. But no, I didn't. But what I did do was I volunteered quite a lot around charities for the blind. My own grandparents were both blind. My paternal grandparents were both blind. And my father commentated for blind fans at football grounds across Scotland. So I did that from a young age as well, up until I started at Radio Clyde, to be honest with you. Just providing running commentaries at games with the blind fans huddled around you in an organisation called the Rex Blind Parties, named after a guy called Rex Kingsley, Bob Kingsley, who was the chief football reporter at the Sunday Mail a long time ago. And so we did that. And curiously, there's a charity in Bishopbriggs called Q and Review, which I'd forgotten about until just now. And it's still on the go because it pops up every now and again on my social media. And they were providing magazines for the blind, and I volunteered there for about a year or so when I was still at school. And that was actually founded in Bishopbriggs High School itself. It was first based in there. It was a school project, which has become a long time service for the blind and visually impaired. So I did that, and the work at Radio Clyde, which kept me busy. You know, kind of midweek games and so on. Through school. So that was my version of the paper.
Do you feel that those kind of experiences helped maybe shape some skills for learning life and work? Yeah.
I mean, for a start, it taught you what I always say to young journalists, the most important thing is to turn up.
Yeah, experience.
Always. Yeah. To turn up. Because, you know, it ain't going to happen if you're not there. So that's really important. So it taught me to turn up. It taught me great experiences watching people. I mean, looking back on it, Radio Clyde was a wee bit like the Wild West back then. There was, you know, a whole range of fascinating characters and intriguing behaviours. None of them bad, I hasten to add, but I mean, it was crazy. You know, all these kind of creative talents in the one building. And you got to observe the office politics, and you also got to work with some amazing journalists and amazing communicators, amazing broadcasters.
Did you ever get the chance to work with the Specky Tube himself, Hugh Keevans?
Arthur Askey, as I call him, Uncle Arthur. I mean, Hugh is a terrific wordsmith. A terrific journalist, a great news gatherer. I mean, Hugh, he's 70 now, and so I was working with him when he was late 30s, early 40s. He looked and sounded exactly the same. He had the demeanour of a much older man back then, but a very orderly brain, and knew how to do an interview, knew how to listen to people, build on their response, and as I say, just very orderly. And he made a lot of the other big names who worked in there and elsewhere look very ordinary to me back then, and as a view I still share. So Hugh was terrific. And Hugh as well, one of his great skills is to know when to throw in a hand grenade to a discussion and then just stand back and let the chaos ensue. So he was absolutely terrific. Working with him. And back then, Chick Young would have been there. It's a very different act from Hugh. Derek Johnston had just retired from playing. He'd been player manager at Partick Thistle for about a fortnight. Davy Provan had just retired. And Davy, I went to primary school in Gourock, and Davy was a kind of local hero down there. Celtic and Scotland winger, of course. And still at Sky doing Premier League games, you know, a really bright guy. So they were all there, and you had DJs like Taggy Tim Stevens. Dewey Donnelly was the mid-morning DJ who was doing Grandstand at our sports scene at the weekend. Paul Coya, an unbelievable talent. Paul, who was still working in radio in London, and he was the first voice on Channel 4, for example. He opened Channel 4 up on TV when it started in '82. But there was just a host of talented guys, Ross King, and a guy called Mike Ruddock who did the breakfast show until fairly recently, died recently. He's one of the most clever men. He could do the kind of yeehaw pop shows and then pop up doing a movies program and then a classical music show on a Sunday night. So these guys were all there. George Bowie started the week before me as a T-boy as well. It's George's birthday today, actually. I was thinking the date reminded me of that. And you know, it was an exciting place to be because local radio was massive then before satellite TV had really kicked in, and before the internet, of course, stifled for me a lot of the media and It's 25 years now since the Telegraph launched the first newspaper website. The newspapers and local media have been in turmoil since then. They've not quite found their place. But back then, radio was king, and you know the characters that worked there and the audience figures were unbelievable.
David, obviously you spoke at length there about your time at school and your time at university. We just want to kind of move on to the professional career. What would you say is the best part about working within the sports media industry?
I think it's, first of all, it's a great privilege. And I used to say it when I was in the studio at Sky, it's a great privilege to cover this. And it really was. It was great to be there. To be honest with you, we get the worst view of the game. The studios are usually parked in the corner for a pretty beauty shot, but you kind of watch the game from there, unless it's down at the penalty box right next to you. So most of the time we would sit with our back to the game and watch it on the telly and watch it in the studio monitor. So slightly odd, I know. But I think the great thing was it's been able to work somewhere where you've enjoyed something every day. And most days I've enjoyed everything about it. Yeah, sure, there are tensions and, you know, there are a lot of interesting characters that can work in TV and the media. But it's an enjoyable way to make your living. And you get to travel the world. I've been to well over 30 countries covering football. And you get to meet some amazing people. You know, I'm really lucky that I've met Pele, I've met Maradona, I've met Cruyff, I've met Ronaldo, I've met Messi. You know, I've met all the names you'd want to meet and more. I've not met Dave Narey, who scored a 25-yarder for Scotland against Brazil. He's probably the one that got away. Doesn't do anything. But, you know, I've been really lucky to meet and greet so many of these people that I would count as heroes. And it's a really enjoyable way to make your living. It's a really enjoyable way to make your living for however long it lasts. The industry's changing rapidly, but it's still great fun.
And how would you say like your career journey has been? Like, how would you? Obviously, you've started off at Clyde, went to Sky, went to BT, then freelance as well. But what's that journey been like? Have you found it tough? Has it been an easier journey?
It's as tough as you make it. I suppose is the honest answer, John. I think there's a lot of pressure working on it. I mean, you were working a lot of hours sometimes. There were times where you wouldn't get a day off during the football season for weeks on end, and then you would get the whole summer off, which was never a great idea. I think that a wee bit more. I think the HR department holds a lot more sway in broadcasting companies now. But certainly there was pressure to perform, pressure to get it right, and if you were getting in not feeling well, if you got a bad throat, or if you hadn't slept well or whatever, then you know it could be tough. But you know, there are tensions. You know, sometimes football people don't like to be questioned. Sometimes they have a go. Sometimes, you know, particularly with social media now, you know, some of the behaviours, the organised chaos that is, and organised smears and attacks on football people, and that includes media online, can be an interesting distraction. It doesn't really bother me, you know, but I've been doing this for a long, long time now. But you know, some of the abuse that is dished out by, you know, inarticulate, nasty people online, you know, I can understand why people let it get to them. It doesn't, for me, I don't consider it to be real. But certainly it's been. You do have to deal with some of these things as they arise. You know, I remember Billy McNeil gave me great advice when I was a teenager. I was covering a game, Motherwell against Falkirk, the year that Motherwell won the cup, and I was covering the game with Archie McPherson and Davy Provan at Radio Clyde. We're up the back in the press room, and Billy McNeil came up. It was Celtic manager. It was his last year as Celtic manager. He came up for a chat with Big Archie. He was close with Archie McPherson, and Billy at one point turned to me and he said, "Listen, son, I'll give you some good advice. Football managers lie. It's what they do. It's what we do. We lie to get what we need. And Billy Helen learned from the best, and Jock Stein from that, how to manipulate people. And I always remember that thinking, wow, that's a really interesting statement. And now, even now, I don't believe football managers unless they're calling another manager a liar. So you're always slightly skeptical of what they say. You're trying to work out, well, is this real? Is this true what they're saying, or is there a reason for that? So I'm always very cautious about what I report, because sometimes people do lie, and as a media person, you've got to do your best to make sure you don't spread that misinformation, if you like, And of course that's more relevant than ever in this kind of Donald Trump era of post-truth,
Fake news and all that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you still get nervous, like when you're interviewing people? Do you still?
No. It's been a long time since that. I quite like the fact I can walk in, and I always do a lot of research before interviews, just to try and think about something that might give me a good journalistic line to get into. But no, it's been a long time. I've been through too much to do that. So you can put me in front of anybody, and I can chat to them, and I know where to commit myself, and I know where not to commit. Don't lead with your chin, otherwise you're liable to get a punch in the jaw. So no, that it did when I was younger, and it does for everybody. When I started reading the news at STV at 23 years old, and I remember turning around that first night with it was Viv Lumsden and Shireen Angiani, who'd been doing it since I was at Bishopbriggs High, and neither of them spoke to me during the broadcast. It was the most extraordinary thing. Usually there's a lot of laughter in the studios, but there wasn't necessarily when Viv was around. And I remember just turning at them and thinking, wow, I used to watch them when I was at school. So that was nerve-wracking, I have to say. Goodness me, that was nerve-wracking. But over time, it goes, and you just get on with it, and you're in control of yourself, and you get the opportunity to control the environment you're in as well. And once you're in that kind of state, then you're prepared. If you're prepared for something, preparation breeds confidence in anything, and confidence from that, overrides nervousness. But you also have to look at what actually is nervousness. I'm going to ask you guys a question here. What is the difference between the feelings you get when you're nervous, the sensations you get, and the sensations you get when you're excited? So what's the difference between the feelings you get when you're nervous and the feelings you get when you're excited? I'm going to throw that to you.
I suppose it's just your mindset, one negative, one positive.
I think, that's right, Scott. I mean, they're the same feelings.
Yeah.
It's what you call them that counts. So if you can say, well, I'm feeling nervous, you've got a face like a slapped butt. But if you say, I'm excited, you smile. Yeah. You're all smiling at the mention of that. So, that was great. That was a great lesson. It was a sports psychologist told me that. And there's a lot of hocus pocus about these guys, who are standing next to the people when they're winning, and then when the athletes are losing, they disappear into the ether. But that was a really good thing for me. So whenever I think I might be feeling nervous, I think, no, I'm excited about this, and you smile, and that for me works, and it might work for other people. Yeah,
superb. Has there been any kind of particular highlights of your career so far, David?
Do you know, it's a difficult one to say. It's funny, I was thinking the other day, it was the anniversary of Borussia Dortmund winning the European Champions League.
Yeah.
And Paul Lambert, who I knew, was in that team. And he was the first British player, Paul, to win the European Cup, or the Champions League as it's called now, with a foreign team. Yeah. Others like Kevin Keegan and Glenn Hoddle, Stevie Archibald and Alan McInally had come close, but Paul did it. Went from Motherwell to Borussia Dortmund, this unbelievable Dortmund team. Swept everything. I went to Dortmund to see Paul make his last appearance. It was against Parma, managed by a young coach called Carlo Ancelotti, and with a host of World Cup winners or future World Cup winners in the team. And I went to the Westfalen and covered that game. And I remember, you know, the send-off that he got, the whole, are you familiar with the wall they have, the big terracing behind the goal? all of that, they were singing Goodbye, Paul Lambert. And that particular, I mean, I ended up on the pitch with him. Probably get a pepper bullet to the head for doing that now, but I ended up at the pitch with him. And I was just so proud that this Scottish guy had made such an impact at this unbelievable stadium. And the stadium at Westfalen it's really compact, close to the pitch. Ibrox is very similar to Ibrox was moulded on the Westfalen, which was built for the '74 World Cup in Scotland. And Scotland played at the ground, but the atmosphere is just unbelievable because it's so tight. Not unlike Tynecastle as well here in Scotland, and I was so proud. So that was a real highlight that night. That was quite early on in my TV career. So that one always stands out as being, you know, just something that absolutely kind of blew me away, you know. So those big Scotland games as well. I covered the Scotland's win against France in Paris, which was unbelievable. And I've worked in World Cups, but back in the TV studio or in the radio studio, 1990. So unbelievable it is. I've been to tournaments, but never covering Scotland there. So that is something which is a niche that I have yet to scratch. But so there's been lots of them. Just, you know, you get big interviews every now and again that make a lot of noise. And you know, I had a really good exclusive this week with Johnny Hayes, ex of Celtic, and he didn't do anyone else. So it went on Talk Sport, and then it went in all the papers, and you know, that was in the papers for 3 days. That sort of stuff. So I still get a kick out of that every time something like that comes off.
Here's a question for you, right? You say that obviously Johnny Hayes was the only one. How do we become successful then? How do we get Dave Tanner in the paper and out online?
How do you get a quote from this podcast into the paper? Well, you have to interview the right people, the right source. I mean, the first thing you've got to learn as a journalist, you know, you've got to ask yourself, why do you do an interview? And interviews are fact-finding missions. So you need to do that. So you need to think about what you're asking, what will get a line. And the other thing that journalists need to get is speak to the right sources. So people within organisations and people at the top, people who make the decisions, or people who are starry, who make, if Lionel Messi yawns, it's news. I remember interviewing David Beckham. I've interviewed Beckham a few times over the years, but I interviewed him when he played for AC Milan at Ibrox. And that was the first time I was really aware of the global power of the internet. And the internet wasn't new then. Social media was new then. But I phoned in what he'd said, and I think the line he gave me that night, and I had it to myself, which was terrific, was that he wanted to play at the World Cup in South Africa for England. His teammate Rino Gattuso said to me off the record afterwards, I knew Rino from his time at Rangers, he said, he's kidding himself. He's a nice boy, but he's kidding himself. And that gruff, mafia-style voice that Rino's got.
Was he Welsh, David? Was Gattuso Welsh?
So you broke up there, John. What was that?
It doesn't matter.
All right, I don't do accents. Can we cut him off? Can we mute him? Fair point, John. But that particular night, he said to me, we've got this. I want to play at the World Cup. And I phoned it into the Sky Sports News studio, and we went on there with the chat. The satellite truck was down that night, so I had to then drive into Glasgow with the tape and feed it. And of course, it takes ages to get out of it. But by the time I got into the office, my phone, it wasn't my phone, but I switched on it was just before iPhones. I switched on the computer, and my name was all over the internet in a variety of different languages, having reported what David Beckham had said. So if you can get a source like him, the best interviewee that I did every time I was in Scotland every year to play golf was Johan Cruyff. Cruyff is the architect of modern football.
Yeah.
The new Barcelona stadium will be called the Johan Cruyff Arena. His kind of adopted son, if you will, is Pep Guardiola. and he's the way that tiki-taka football that Barcelona and Man City play better than anyone is a Cruyff creation. So best European player there's ever been, bar none. Most clever football brain there's been, bar none, and a trendsetter as well. So he's the best source in football, but also he likes to speak, or he liked to speak. And when he spoke, he went in hard on Mourinho for his negative style of football, his cynical approach to football in the view of Cruyff, and he adored Pep. So, TV interviews generally last a minute and a half. I remember one night on the Champions League show we ran 15 minutes of Cruyff on the main Champions League magazine show, and that was a big kick. So so that's how you do it, John. You get good sources, you ask some good questions which elicit good answers, and then you have to get it out there and post it, and write it up on the website. So if anyone wants to make a noise, podcasts are good at creating and gathering content nowadays. But what you really need to do is get it on the internet, get it written, because that way you can search it. You can't Google a podcast. You can't Google content in a podcast if you think about it. It's got to be written onto the website. So if anybody's looking for a career in the multimedia, that would be the way ahead.
Superb. So can you recall any particular setbacks from your career, David, and how did they kind of help you to learn and grow?
Yeah, there's been lots over the years. I think the big one for me and for a host of colleagues around the same age as me, overpaid middle-aged men, was when we all left Sky 3 years ago. We all left about the same time, including my best mate, Fraser Robertson, who's subsequently died of ill health. That was really difficult because we'd been at a place for a long time, and we were. But I think your ability, you have to remind yourself. Dougie Donnelly said to me at that time, he said, remember, he said, you remain who you are. Your ability remains the same. Your experience remains the same. And that was very inspirational. That was a couple of weeks after I left. And the papers were all over it at the time. And because you were doing the contract stuff, you couldn't see anything about it. So it was a bit of a free-for-all. But he said that, and from there, that really motivated me. Within a month, within 2 months, I was doing stuff for BT Sport. I was doing stuff in London for TalkSport, and you were away again. So I think those were, not everything goes your way. Sometimes people say, "Well, I hear what you're saying, but it's a no," and you have to deal with that. And you can't take anything personally. That would be the one thing I would say. If you take things personally, then I think you'll spend a lot of time with your head in a bucket, to use a football phrase. Do you teach that one in the department?
No, I think they will now, though.
I think you should.
Hey, David, so the next question's from me. So you spoke about a huge variety of different high-profile interviews that you've done. You said Pele, Johan Cruyff, Beckham, Jose Mourinho. Could you tell us maybe about some of your most enjoyable or entertaining interviews that you can remember?
Yes, I certainly could.
Stories. Must have some funny stories.
No, I don't have any funny stories. Cruyff was number one. Johan Cruyff was number one. And I remember being really thrilled to see him because he kind of disappeared. He won the European Cup with Barcelona as a coach in '92. And we didn't see a lot of Spanish football until the advent of satellite TV, and even then he was kind of out of the picture by that point. So I remember meeting him for the first time and going, "Wow, there he is." But actually, the one that made me go when he walked in the room, a sharp intake of breath, was Dennis Law, who's Scotland's greatest player of all time. If it's not Dalglish, it's Law. And just Dennis has just got a presence about him. I mean, he's obviously an old man now. He'll be, was he now just turned 80? But he certainly had a real presence about him, because, he's an iconic figure. All the guys that you meet who've got statues cast in their honour, like Dennis Law, like Sir Alex, like Eusebio, God, there's many more that really make you go, "Oh, this guy is something special." You were talking before we started recording about funny stories. Eusebio was an interesting one for me. And Eusebio was European Cup winner with the great Benfica team of the 60s. I think it's widely agreed that they were the best team at the 1966 World Cup, knocked out by England in the semi-finals. And this guy, Eusebio, was unbelievable. And I was invited, when we were in Portugal, I was invited to go and meet Eusebio. And it was a reunion of the 1966 World Cup squad. And I got to sit, the cameraman and I got to sit at this dinner next to these guys, none of whom really spoke very much English, but the old fella next to me just had these kind of pinny stickers of himself, and football cards, cigarette cards in those days, come around and show him all these pictures of him, And of course there was no iPhones in 2003, I think it was. You couldn't Google it. So it was amazing just getting all these stories out of people, even though there was a language barrier. And after the main course, I had noticed that Eusebio, who was going to interview us after dinner, he was preparing for the interview in a way that probably wasn't the best. He was knocking back a few ports. So I said to the guy who kindly invited me there to this private dinner, I said, Eusebio, maybe do it just now. And yeah, okay. And Eusebio was very jolly, sat down, clearly had a few. And I said to him, Eusebio, my name's David, I'm from Scotland. Scotland. Jimmy Johnston, Willie Henderson, Jimmy Baxter. Great parties. But whenever these guys had met up, they used to go out on the Raz. Willie Henderson, who's still alive and still running up and down mountains and across the deserts.
That was some Northern Irish accent.
John, I'm loving your style. We haven't spoken about my views on PE teachers, and that's coming up later. Everyone, that'll be worth hearing. I'm going to file you under that. I like Scott and I like Grant. I'm just not sure about you so far. Accents are not my strong point, John. You're right. But Eusebio had played for the rest of the world select a few times, and Willie Henderson, the Rangers, had played a few times, and they'd all gone out on the lash because usually they would fly home after games 2 or 3 days later. So he spoke basically about the drinking or the partying and the fun and games they'd had off the pitch with all these Scottish players, which wasn't really a great interview. And then I said to him, we've got Luis Figo at Real Madrid, and I think Cristiano Ronaldo was just coming through at that time. I said, but do you still consider yourself to be the greatest Portuguese player of all time? And he said, I'm not Portuguese. And of course he wasn't. He'd, like Ronaldo, he came from a colony. Ronaldo was from what's it called again? Madeira. Where's Ronaldo from? Madeira. Well done. And he'd come from an African colony and didn't consider himself to be Portuguese. Now, I didn't know that. So it was quite a put down. And the interview from that chaotic start, descended into more chaos. And we got about 30 usable seconds. I mean, he was well done in line, but he'd argued over whether he was the greatest Portuguese player of all time because he wasn't Portuguese in his view. He played for Portugal. He's their best ever player with respect to Ronaldo and to Figo. And it kind of went downhill from there. So those are the ones that you sometimes remember because they don't go to plan. We got a little bit of gold dust, but just not a lot. But I'm still talking about it 15 years on, so that I also get some value from it.
Can you always tell if it's going to be a good interview or a bad interview?
Yeah, you sometimes can tell right away. If they eyeball you, if they look at you in the eye, John, if they look at you in the eye, then you're in for something. Or if they're not looking at you, you might be in a bit of bother. So you always try and relax people, and as you guys did with me, try and engage with them beforehand, make them feel comfortable, and from there ask the right questions. My first question is always, nice to meet you. So, usually you're talking to them about a particular reason, maybe about a game that's coming up or a game that's just been, or a book that they're plugging, whatever it is. But I'll often say something like, tell me all about it. Something like that. And just let them open up for you. Let them tell me what they're thinking. Let them set their agenda. And often you learn from that. And then you can build up on that. Now, I'll still have a list of questions that I can use. My agenda, if you like, but I'll let them set it first of all, And the best question, if you're doing interviews, for me, is always a simple one. Why? Just one word, why? And from that, people explain and they drill deeper for you. And often that's where the story is, that's where the interest is. Well, that's where the problem is if you're speaking to someone, on a kind of, on a interpersonal level.
I was playing golf with someone on Tuesday, an interview with Jim Baxter and yourself. Is that right? Or am I just in a tangent?
John, sorry, I couldn't hear that. Sorry, mate.
I was playing golf with someone on Tuesday who mentioned that you had an interview with Jim McLean.
Jim McLean?
Yes.
Yeah, I used to interview Jim a lot. For those who don't know, Jim was the manager of Dundee United from 71 till about 93, 94. Won the league with them. I mean, they hadn't won a teapot before that. Won 2 League Cups late 70s. They had not won a trophy before the late 70s. Won the league in 1983. They won it the week that Aberdeen beat Real Madrid in the European Cup Winners' Cup final. Dundee United, Celtic and Aberdeen were all going for the league on the last day, and Dundee United won it with a squad of about 16 players. It's unbelievable, really. Great Dave Neary was in that team, Paul Sturrock. Richard Gough was a young fullback, went on to win many caps and the title Rangers. So a really, really good, talented squad. But he and Alec Ferguson broke the Celtic Rangers' hold on Scottish football. And then he was chairman for many years. But he was known for having a temper, quite a tyrannical character. And Jim and I got on well. For whatever reason, he took a shine to me. But he famously punched a BBC reporter called John Barnes in an interview after a game when the pressure and it doesn't keep him the best of health. And I think that the signs were maybe beginning to show when he was chairman at the club. And by this point, I mean, he was majority shareholder, manager, then chairman and majority shareholder. It was unbelievable, really, what he did at the club. And he lost the plot and punched a reporter, for a fairly anodyne question. But sometimes these guys are under pressure, particularly after the games. I had my own one with Craig Levine, who was bizarrely was appointed Scotland manager. I've still never worked it out. And Levine, was not clearly struggling in the job. And he stormed out of an interview with me and later on said some stuff about it in the newspapers, which was not accurate, was ill-advised, but it was a guy who was kind of, in my opinion, out of his depth in that particular role. And he stormed off live on air, and which made headlines all over the place across the UK and on the internet as well. So it made me look like Jeremy Paxman, but really I've been quite kind on him. I was gentle with him, but he'd kind of, the pressure got to him. Yeah. And I remember the glazed look in his eyes before he walked off. Afterwards, he said I had 2 choices, to walk off or to punch him. And of course, that was inaccurate. He had 3 choices. One was to answer the question, as he had done 100,000 times before. But pressure had got to him, and so you've always got to be aware of that in life. That sometimes you're meeting people who are under pressure, and it might be under pressure to to deliver the milk or to deliver the newspapers, to deliver a coherent PE lesson, to deliver an interview, whatever it is. You've got to be aware that sometimes people are under pressure, need a little bit of understanding. So yeah, Jim McLean was for me very good, because he's a godfather of Scottish football when I was started in television. He doesn't keep so well now, Jim, and well into his 80s, but probably the greatest Scottish football brain there's been, you know, after Busby, Matt Busby, Jock Stein, and, you know, that generation. A very shrewd guy, but also a tyrannical ruler whose players either loved him or hated him. There was nothing in between with me, Jim.
On the back of you just speaking about some of the high profile interviews that you've done, I read, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I read that you snuck into a pub when you were still at school to interview Jim Baxter.
That's right, yeah. My first interview was with Jim Baxter, and I mentioned at the beginning of your podcast that I had done a radio training course on a Monday afternoon in Argyle Street, at the Anderson end of Argyle Street, which was pretty shabby back then, looking back on it. And Dougie Jackson, who ran the course, came in, and it was the afternoon, and I was there, and I was wearing my Bishopbriggs prefects blazer with the red braiding on it. And he said, "Listen, I've set up an interview for you." And I said, "Oh, right, go on. I've never done an interview. Lovely. Yeah, it's a famous footballer." "It's all right." I said, "Who?" He said, I don't know anything about football." I said, "But I recognise this guy, and I know he's a big name." And so he said, "Right, we'll need to go and it was this old smoky pub. They're all sitting smoking cigarettes in those days, before the smoking ban. And so we had a carrier bag, and my school blazer went in there, and my school tie went in there, and in we went. And I remember looking around, and I hadn't been in pubs before that point. Kids didn't do lunches and playrooms and all that the way they do now. And this was this old house in Argyle Street in Anderson. And through the smoke, I could see behind a couple of pints of beer and a couple of whiskies was the great Jim Baxter, you know, the guy who played keepy uppy at Wembley to take the mickey out of the England World Cup winning side when we beat them in '67. And, you know, there's a generation of Rangers fans who say he was the greatest Rangers player of all time, with respect to John Gregg or Gascoigne or Laudrup or any of the other candidates for that accolade. And I sat down worked the radio recorder, and I sat down and I interviewed him with no preparation. I just had to go with what I felt. I've still got the tape somewhere. Funnily enough, actually, I bought this week, which is, I don't know if you see that. It's a device that's a USB cassette capture machine. It allows you to old tape cassettes from the 70s and 80s and put them onto a file, so you can digitize it. So if I find that tape, I'll put it on with that. And I sat and chatted to him, and I remember he played for Sunderland, and was able to ask about that, and ask about Wembley, and ask about, you know, some of his teammates. So that was quite terrifying. Now, if you were given someone to interview, you could quickly get your phone and kind of go a quick update. But so you really had to think on your feet back then. So it was all about knowledge. I think a lot of presenters can come in now and they don't have any knowledge, but, you know, they've got a smile and they can Google stuff and stat packs and away they go. But certainly back then, one of the important things about journalism, you have to have a depth of knowledge. It's easier to get away with it now, but back then you really had to think on your feet. So yes, that was my first interview with Jim Baxter, and so that was a really high starting point, and you know, hopefully I've built on that from there.
Did you ask him about the keepy uppies?
Yeah, I think I would have done. I can't remember now. I mean, that would have been 1988. Yeah, certainly when you think of Baxter, you think of that, don't you? You think of that. So I interviewed him once after that, and it was in December '99. It was when Ibrox Park was 100 years old, and they brought a whole bunch of players, and I was in the room with them all, interviewing them all, and Baxter was there. He had a picture of him and Willie Henderson with Muhammad Ali, they brought in some of the scrapbooks and whatnot. Because a lot of these guys had come from abroad and hadn't seen each other for years. He died not long after that. Yeah, it was still a great place to start. You know, I've been very lucky that I've met that golden generation, Jimmy Johnston and Neil and all of those guys. Bobby Lennox is still with us. In fact, when I used to go to school, you would see some of the guys walking about. There was quite a few of them. Lived in Bishopbriggs. Stevie Chalmers, who won the European, he scored the winner in the European Cup final for Celtic, lived in Kirky Road. So there was Joe McBride, who was in the squad, broke his leg shortly before the final. Lived all these days in Bishopbriggs, so it was there was a few faces about.
He just away from the football. I read that you interviewed Billy Connolly.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like?
They say don't meet your heroes, and one or two of my heroes have been a big disappointment. But Billy Connolly defies that rule or that theory, because he just is amazing. I met him a few times over the years, and Billy doesn't tell jokes. He just tells funny stories about Glasgow, doesn't he? Certainly, and more so when I was growing up, because he was still living in Glasgow in the 70s and 80s before he went to America. But yeah, I've met him a few times at football, and he's just utterly charming and very, very, as you would expect, very funny. A lot of comedians you meet, and I've met a lot of comedians over the years, they're not always that funny when you meet them. But Billy is funny because he's not a joke teller as such. He sees the funny things in life. He was absolutely superb. Did a Scottish Cup draw with him one time, actually. One of the few Scottish Cup draws that didn't end in disaster for some reason or other.
It's on my list as well.
Yeah. John, look at the state of your handwriting, by the way. That's disgraceful. You can tell this is the PE department, by the way. That's disgraceful. So, the big one's absolutely superb. Rod Stewart, who's always got a touch of the wacky about him. I did a Scottish Cup draw with him, which ended in international headlines. That was about 3 years ago, and we were doing a couple of Scottish Cup games back to back, and the studio was at Airdrieonians ground, where Celtic were playing, and it was a home game for Albion Rovers. They were using Airdrie's terrific stadium, and during the game, I saw on my telephone on Twitter, there was a picture came up of Rod Stewart arriving earlier at the ground, and he was wearing this big kind of leopard print neckerchief scarf thing, and a kind of John Motson style 1970s fur coat. And usually when people walk into football grounds, they kind of smile at the cameras. But Rod was like this, hey, like a starfish. And I remember thinking, oh, someone's in form. And then before the draw started, we were during a commercial break. I shouted off air to the guys just to check they could hear me. The president of the FA, Alan McRae. I said, Alan, how you doing? It's David. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, Alan, how you doing? I said, good. That's great. Can everyone hear me? I said, Rod, how you doing? And he said, Sir Rod David. He'd just been knighted. And I noticed he gave Alan McRae a bit of a tweak in the backside. He nipped his backside. And Alan Stubbs had just left us in the studio, was the other guy pulling the ball. And I could see Stubbs kind of looking around going, what's going on here? So there was a whiff of madness in there. And then we came out of the break. I chat a little bit about what the numbers and which numbers matched up with which teams. And over we went. And it became very evident very quickly in the draw that Rod was still having a bit of fun with this. And his eyes were a little bit bloodshot. So he's maybe had he likes a lunch at Regano, just off of Gal Street. And he really hammed it up. He was kind of holding the ball up like 7. It was like a bingo caller, and it was really funny. And I didn't notice it first because I was writing down the draw as it came out. You know, you're writing down the draw and what we're going to say about that. What's the relevant statistics there, the relevant news there? Who did they beat yesterday, or have they met in the cup before, or whatever? And then I could hear them all going in my earpiece. Oh my God, that's good. And I could hear them all laughing, and I looked up and I saw him. He was having a real old time of it. And at the end of it, again, he kind of tweaked Al, this time on air, tweaked Alan in the bottom. And Alan handed back to me, and then Rob went, where's David? And he's kind of looking around because I'm just a voice coming from a speaker for them. So it was absolutely chaos. And I didn't realise how big it was until I got in my car and I put Talk Sport on the radio, and it was their headline story on the news that Rod had been having a bit of fun on the Scottish Cup draw. And that night I was getting texts from my brother-in-law in Hong Kong. Craig Moore, the old Rangers captain, texted me from Australia. Mo Johnson texted me from Florida. It had gone around the world. And the next day I was shopping here in Edinburgh, and a lady came up to me in Waitrose and Morningside and said, are you that young man off television, aren't you? And I said, yeah.
The accent here.
All over the papers. Yeah, that was my Welsh accent that time. Did you like that? She said, look, I was all over. We're all over the papers. It had gone properly viral, and she said, we're a big fan of yours in our house. Can I get your autograph? And she said, can I get a selfie with you for my daughter, just to show that I've seen you? I said, yeah, no problem at all. And she said, listen, I said, thanks very much, and went in to get my milk. And she said, listen, before you go, can I ask you a quick question? I said, yeah, sure. She said, what's the weather going to be like tonight, Sean? Now, I don't think I look like Sean Batty, but clearly I did to her, you know. So my biggest fan wasn't necessarily mine. I told her it was going to be sunny, by the way.
Brilliant. Mr. Johnson, is it you or is it me here?
I think it's number 7 now for you, Mr. McHugh.
Right, I think I had number 7. And for the young aspiring sports broadcasters that we have at the school, what would you say is the kind of key skills, key qualities?
For aspiring broadcasters at school? Get involved where you can. If you can get involved and help, you know, and maybe helping out a charity, you know, like the blind as I did, or if you can get a job with helping out at one of the broadcasters, I would encourage you to do that. The other big thing that's very useful to do is to read a lot. Read a lot is really important. Read a lot of good quality journalism. You know, read good newspapers. I know I speak to my journalism classes sometimes at Napier, and I'll often ask, so who read a newspaper today? Now, we would have read every newspaper, but, you know, sometimes as one hand goes up. And there might have been a couple of days before. So read the best in the business, improve your knowledge, and also, you know, absorb what good stuff they're doing. And if you can do a blog, if you can do a podcast, you know, get writing, and that allows you to gather a body of work, and it's useful to do that. And it's all about multi-platform stuff as well for broadcasters. Like my Twitter account. Do you all follow my Twitter account?
Yeah.
You don't follow us, but or you don't follow me back.
No, I've blocked you, John, but that's only during this interview. I do follow them, by the way, everybody. We've been DMing each other. But, you know, it's but multi-platform now, so improve your video skills, and you guys can all talk to a camera, and you can all, you know, set up a shot as you've shown here. Do as much as you can of that, because you know, here, I mean, there's more kit in that phone than there was in the radio studio that I worked in. You know, the big radio studios that I worked in back in the day. It's unbelievable how much stuff is in there now, audio visual work. So, and I think as well, I noticed it with the students, and I noticed it with my own son. People now are that generation are now totally comfortable talking into cameras because they've done it since they were knee high to a grasshopper. Whereas we started in television, we'd never looked in a camera lens before and taught, or certainly not spoken into it other than to say cheese. So the kit is all there for people. You can get high quality microphones and online very, very easily. Everything is so accessible now. So take advantage of that, use it and create content. Be respectful, be courteous, be professional. And always remember that a tweet today is something that can, embarrass you. If it can embarrass you tomorrow or in a year or in 10 years, be very careful. Be very careful.
Yeah.
So your finisher is, if you were to select 3 people throughout history to interview, who would they be and why? They can be dead or alive. They can be people you've interviewed before or don't interview.
That's a really interesting question. Right, David Neary. I would like to interview David Neary.
Yeah.
Because David Neary played most of his career at Dundee United, a little spell at Raith Rovers, scored this amazing goal for Scotland against Brazil. There's a great photograph from the World Cup video of Escocia 1, Brazil 0 from the scoreboard at the stadium in Seville. It was the Real Betis Stadium. I went to visit it with my colleague Davy Provan when we were there covering the UEFA Cup final at one of the newer stadiums. So I'd like to interview Dave Neary because he doesn't do interviews. He's quite a reclusive character. So I'd like to interview him. I think I would like to have interviewed Jock Stein. I met him when I was a kid. I've got his autograph upstairs somewhere. I met him at a game. He'd have been terrific. Matt Busby would be another good one as well. The guy who built Manchester United. When he became manager of Man United, the Old Trafford literally was a bomb site. Having been, suffered a lot of damage from German bombing in the war, and he took over in the 50s, so it was still like that. So guys like that would be interesting to me. Those would be interesting. Some politicians would be interesting. I'd like to have President Kennedy always fascinated me, but just about how crazy a time that was. And we see all the current problems in America. And I've seen Trump in the flesh and heard him speak at Turnberry a couple of years ago, and wasn't hugely impressed by him. But Kennedys of a generation that didn't speak very often publicly, but when they did, it carried a real impact, and he was dealing with a lot of the problems that have been created in recent weeks in America. So he would be an interesting one to look at as well.
Yeah.
I'm all questions.
Yeah, just on behalf of the PE department, David, thanks very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, guys. It's been nice to do it. Wilson Fulton and Jimmy Sinclair were my PE teachers, and you seem far nicer than them. At no point have you made me do press-ups, sit-ups, bench presses, or thrown a medicine ball at me, or a pudding ball, which was a ball of choice that had never seen before, never seen since. So thank you for being so user-friendly with me as well, guys.
Just wait till we go video here and we stop recording.
By the way, do you still have a red blaze pitch at the school?
No. Anymore.
I've still got the scars on the knees from playing on that red blaze pitch. From my memory, it was. Were you there? Did you work at the South Cross Hill Road campus?
Me and Mr. Johnson, Scott, we both went to the old school. So we remember it fondly.
Is my memory right? It was quite a big slope on the pitch.
Yeah, I think it was.
Big kind of gullies as well, where the drainage had been kind of washed away. And I remember sometimes somebody putting the ball up onto the main Edinburgh-Glasgow railway line, and then someone being sent up for it. I'm not sure if that would be signed off by health and safety now. So the Red Blaze pitch was absolutely awful. So and I've seen and some of the school social media stuff about how good the facilities are at the academy. So I'm pleased to see that, and I hope to see a few more football players coming out, and a few more sports stars of variety of sports coming out of the school. Dylan McGee up at Aberdeen went to school, maybe around at the same age as you guys. Gordon Chisholm, who was a captain of Sunderland and took Dundee United and as a manager, Queen of the South, into the Scottish Cup final. Unbelievable achievements. There's Alan Irvine, who was the assistant manager to Davy Moyes at Everton for 10 years and had a really great career as a player. West Brom manager himself. He was there. Dougie Friedman was a year below me at school. Who's a long career down south and a player and a manager. So there's some good athletes and some good players came out of there. Sadly, none of it rubbed off on me.
Or me and Grant.
Okay, thanks again. Thanks for joining us as well, guys. And for anybody watching, make sure that you follow our Twitter account at Bishy PE. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much again, David. Thank you.
You're welcome, and I do follow that account. And by the way, mine is David Tanner TV, so give me a follow, guys. It'd be nice to hear from you.
David, I think I've got you on Instagram as well. You need to follow me on Instagram. We need to be on Instagram.
I'm doing it now. I can't say any further than that. I'm doing it right now. Here we are. Follow block.